Hey guys, this is Lucas from Better Coding Academy, and this video will be a quick start guide to using React with Redux. So let's get started over here. I've got a very simple app just set up using Parcel, and it's just saying hello inside of index.js right now. But let's get started with Redux, and I'm going to show you the way that I like to do it. So first and foremost, what is Redux? It calls itself a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. It's probably better explained as just like some sort of like local database. Its main advantage over using internal state is that you can kind of share information between different components, and then there is a lot of Redux libraries and frameworks which can be built on top of Redux and can kind of additionally process that data and use it in different ways. But I'm just going to be showing you the most bare bones way of getting started with Redux, and then we can keep going from there. So we've got Redux over here, the website, like I said, not exactly super useful in my opinion, but let's get started and I'm going to show you how I like to do it. So I like to have a store directory over here, and then we create an index.js inside of there. And before I get started with that, there is something that I want to show you, which is the Redux Dux pattern. We've got Dux, Redux Reducer Bundles. Now this essentially is a single file which contains a whole bunch of stuff relevant to Redux, and we are going to be using this because it's quite easy to use. It puts all of the necessary stuff inside of a single file, so we don't have to create like 40 different files. So it just makes life really easy, and we're going to do that. So let's have a look at an example for logging a user in and out using Redux. Because to be completely honest, I've written React applications with over 40,000 lines of code and all that kind of stuff. And like, honestly, even in all of that, with all of that state management, the only real bit of Redux that I've had to use, well, that I thought was necessary to be used, was just logging the user in and out, and everything else I just did using either internal state, some like amount of like GraphQL with Apollo or whatever, but I've just found other methods to be better than just simply using Redux for everything. But in any case, people love using Redux and your situation might be different to mine, so I'm going to show you how to get started with all of this. So what we're going to do here is we've got our store, we've got our index.js. Now the first thing we're going to have to do is go over here and install Redux and install React Redux as well. So now let's get our store set up. So for our store, what we're going to do, let's go and write import create store from Redux like this. And this is essentially what we're going to use to create our store. And the basic idea is we do const store equals create store and then some stuff here. And then we export default store like so. So it just contains everything and it's all there. And we're going to now put it all together using this pattern over here. So specifically here, what we're going to have a look at is taking this approach here for our session, and we're going to be storing it inside of a directory called Dux because that's what it recommends to do here. So we're going to go inside of store here, we're going to create a directory called Dux, and inside of here, let's create a new file, and I'm going to call this one session.js. So this is going to be my session reducer. The concept of a reducer, it's basically just like a glorified function. I'll explain a bit more in just a second, but we've got our duck over here. Our duck is essentially just the reducer plus all of the other kind of stuff that we need to make it work. So first and foremost, what is a reducer? So a reducer is a function. That's basically it. It's a function which takes in a single value and produces a single value. Now, the idea of having a reducer is that it is incredibly predictable. That's the whole point of Redux here in a nutshell, is that when you have this function, the parameters that you pass into the function, including like the way that you want to change the current data, it changes the data in a way that is predictable and is always going to produce the same output given the same input. So that's like the most fundamental concept of a reducer, but I'm going to show you in a little bit more detail right now. So we've got our default export default function reducer. Yeah, we can do that as well. So just export default function reducer like that, and we've got our state and our action. So this is something that we're going to need. Let's just do state equals this, action equals that. So these are like our default parameters here. So export default function reducer, and then we also have our actions over here, and we have our action creators and side effects. We're not going to worry about that. So let's go up here and let's just have two actions here. So first action we're going to call login, and this one here is quite complicated in the way they do it, but we can kind of do something similar. We'll just call this one, it uses my app, but I'm just going to get rid of that. We're going to call it directly session login like that, and then I'm going to have another one which is log out, and then session /log out like so. And we have our reducer here, and then we also have this concept of an action creator. So I'm going to do that here as well. And the way that we do it is basically export function login user, and then we can write return type login, and let's do one more, export function log out user, and then we can do return type log out. Now you can choose to use arrow functions here. It really doesn't matter. You can do export const log out user equals arrow like that. That's probably better because we're not using the this inside of here, so it's better to keep it more, I guess, like lightweight technically, but that's just totally up to you and how you like to do it. And we can do that up here for this one as well, which technically is better in some like weird sense. So session reducer equals that, and then like that, and then we have to export default session reducer like so. So we've got our reducer over here, and we've got login user, logout user, and then we've got login and logout here. And I'm just going to label this real quick. So I've got actions up here, and I've got my my reducer, lowercase because lowercase looks better. And then down here, I'm going to call this one action creators. So now to slightly explain what is going on here. Our session reducer contains state. Now, like I said before, the state is meant to be predictable. So when you pass in a certain state with a certain action, it should predictably return a certain new state. So that's kind of how a reducer works, is like it just transforms the value of the state here. So then when we have our actions and we have our action creators, what's going on here is our actions are essentially what we can do to our state. So let's have a look at that here. We've got state equals that as the default value here. I'm not sure if that is the best thing to do here. You can do probably like is logged in false, something like that. And then actually, you know what? I don't like having too much of that in line. Let's just do default state like this. Is logged in false like so, and then we can go here and just write let state equal default state. So this is just the default value for the state parameter, so I'm going to pass it in like so. Action, well, we technically don't need to do that, but it like really doesn't matter too much here, I guess. So we can do that like so, and then the way we would normally do it is just return state down the bottom, but then we can do like switch action.type, and then we can do, say for example, case login, and then if we log in, then we just do return curly brace state, and then we do is logged in equal to true, and then let's just copy this real quick and change this one to log out, and then return state is logged in false, and then if none of these apply, then we just return the original state. So depending on your experience and familiarity with Redux and with JavaScript in general, you may or may not understand the syntax here, and you might find it to be really weird. So we've got ... state. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are we doing this when we only have is logged in false? Well, the reason for that is because we might not just have is logged in false, we might also have other properties, and we don't want to discard them because we're being careless. We always want to like kind of slightly prepare for the future here in these kinds of situations. That's why we do ... state. By the way, ... state this is the spread operator. It basically copies, does a shallow copy of all the properties inside of an object, and by putting is logged in true underneath it, we're basically replacing the value of is logged in with true, regardless of what it was previously. So now we have our action.type is either login or logout. Now you'll notice we call it action.type, and type here corresponds with type down here and type down there. So you're starting to see a little bit of a pattern, and this will kind of be fleshed out in a little bit more detail in just a second. But we've got login, we've got logged out, and that basically changes is logged in from true to false and so on. Now inside of our code over here, let's go into our store. What we can actually do is inside of Redux here, let's create an index.js file. And what we can do here is we can export default as session from /session like so. So what this does is this takes the default export from within the session module here, which is our session reducer, and we name it as session and we export that from index. So now what we can do is inside of here, we can do import or as, I guess we call this one reduces from /dux, which I guess is a weird name, but let's just go with it. And then we can do create store reducers like so, and we have our store set up. So now we have a basic store working. Let's go and let's bind this into our Redux. So inside of index.js over here, I'm just rendering hello, but what I'm going to do is just create a very simple components root, just a very simple boilerplate over here, just to render root, so we have something to render other than just an h1 on the page there. So, well, technically we're still rendering an h1 here, but it's inside of root, so that's my point there. Let's go and let's write root, and let's import provider from React Redux. And let's also import the store from /store. So now we have our store and we have our provider. So the provider, if you're familiar with React context, essentially it is just this wrapper that you have to have for Redux where all of the kind of information is stored, and it just helps your whole app work properly. So you need to have that. Let's do this and put provider around it. I pressed Shift Option W inside of VS Code on Mac. I don't know if yours works, but mine does, so that's what I like to do. We have store inside of here like so. And now if we have a look at our app, forgot to run it. Let me run it real quick. we actually get an error. And the reason that we get an error is because I completely done goofed here. We just need to include here combine reduces. I forgot about that. And let's just do const reduces equals combine reduces. And we'll probably just call this one, I don't know, like ducks here, I guess, and then reduces and then create store using that. So now let's have a look at our code. And root is not defined because I just keep making silly mistake after silly mistake. So import root from /components/root like so. And now you see we have root working. So we have our store over here. We have ducks, we have reduces, we have store. It might seem a little bit complicated and all over the place, but before we actually continue, let's just go and make it a little bit more complicated, because why not? So what I'm going to show you now is Redux DevTools. Now Redux DevTools is really great for debugging and working with Redux. So specifically, I like to go to this Redux DevTools extension, and let's go down here. You'll notice I have Redux DevTools installed inside of Chrome, so you can just install that off the Chrome Web Store, that's no problem. But in order to get it working with this store, we need to include this line of code inside of our Redux store. So we grab that line over there, and we go into our create store here, put a comma, and then we paste that whole line in, and it's super long and it's kind of complicated, but now you'll notice that this icon here has gone green. So now if I click on this icon, we get this nice little window over here, and I'm actually going to just pop that out real quick. So to right like that, we have this, and can we zoom in? Yes, we can. Perfect. Okay, so this is our window over here, and you'll notice that we have like a whole bunch of stuff here. But if we click on state over here, we have session, and inside of session we have is logged in is false. So that's super duper cool. And the reason that it shows is logged in is false is because you'll notice that if our session reducer, the default state is like that. And then when we have our default state with this value here, it's passing in is logged in as false. Now, if we change the default value to is logged in booyah, then you'll notice we get booyah here. So it actually runs this reducer for the first time with this action here, which is at init. And then with that action, neither of these are matched, so it just returns the state. Now remember, it doesn't really pass in any state to start off with, so then we just get the default state, which is logged in false. So that's how that works, and now we can see that here. Now we're going to be using Redux DevTools in a little bit more detail in just a second, but now what we're going to do is we are going to actually bind this up with our component here. So we have root here, and inside of here, I'm going to do a new component. I'm going to call it login status. Now the reason I'm going to do this is just to show you kind of what this would be like if you had a larger application. I'm not suggesting that you have to have components separated like this, but I'm just showing you what I would do. So I have an index.js which just imports and exports it, like kind of simple stuff there. I'm going to import login status like that inside of root. I'm going to put a nice div here, and I'm going to just do login status like so then we can see it on the page like that. So now inside of login status here, what we're going to do is we are going to be using React Redux to get the value of is logged in. If I type in React Redux and I go to the React Redux documentation. So now if I go over here to using React Redux and I go down to hooks, and we have a hooks API, which is awesome. It's great. So yay, we have a use selector, and let's have a look at using that. So what we're going to do is inside of login status here, let's go here and let's write import use selector from React Redux. So now that you've got use selector from React Redux, what we're going to do here is we are going to get some data, and let's just kind of dump it all onto the component here. So const data equals use selector, and let's have a quick look at the API here. The first one is a selector function, so let's just do that real quick. Use selector, and then this one is going to be our store, and we are going to get store.session, and let's see what that will return us. So I'm not actually 100% certain that this will even work, but let's just have a look and let's see how that goes. So now let's do that, and you see we get is logged in equal to false, which is great. Now let's actually get rid of the word session here, and let's look at the whole thing, and you see we have our session reducer. Now, the whole Redux store is a big object. The data inside of it is a big object, and it consists of different properties are each reducer. So this property here is the session reducer. And the reason it's called session is because inside of store ducks over here, inside of index.js, we exported default as session. Now, if I didn't export default as session here, if I did banana, then you'll see that this becomes banana. It's not because we called the file session, but it's because we exported it as session over here, and when we imported it inside of ducks, we have ducks.session. So that's kind of how that works, and that's how we get that there. So for login status here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one is logged in, and we're going to directly fetch store.session.isLoggedIn like so. So now what I'm going to do here is just write a quick strong tag here, and then is logged in, and then I'm going to write put a ternary here, so logged in, and not logged in. So real simple, if it's logged in, show logged in. If it's not logged in, show not logged in, like that. And now you see we get not logged in. So now I'm going to go inside of root here and let's create another component. So this one we're going to call our actions. You can call this whatever you want. I really don't care here. I'm just setting it up for simplicity's sake and put actions over here. Create that. And then new file, index.js, and then actions like so. This should render properly if I just save this file again. Okay, cool. So now we have actions down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a div. I'm going to put two buttons inside of here. First button is going to be called login, second button called logout, and obviously we're going to get these two buttons working, but right now they don't do anything. So now let's have a look at doing that, and this is where our actions come in handy. So what we actually need to do is basically tie this button with this action over here. You'll notice that we have a login user action down here. So this is what we kind of want to tie it to, and we also have logout user. But you'll notice that these functions only return an object. They don't actually do anything specifically to influence the actual session reducer over here. So I'm going to show you how to connect all of that. So now we've got use dispatch over here. So what we're going to do is we are going to go inside of actions here, and we're going to import use dispatch from React Redux. What we do here is const dispatch equals use dispatch, as we can see here. And now in order to get these buttons working, what we need to do is I'm actually going to, before we get these buttons hooked up, I'm going to show you how to change this using the Redux DevTools, because I think that is mighty cool. So I've got it over here. It's nice and big. Let's just do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run you through the code first, and then we're going to come back and have a look at this. So inside of the code here, you'll notice that in order to change is logged in to true, all we have to do is inside of our action, we just need action.type to be login. Now what's login equal to? It's equal to session login, which is up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go with this button here. There we go. And this is our action. So for our action here, our type, I'm going to call session/login, and just pay attention to the page here in the background. If I press dispatch, you'll see that we're now logged in, and we have our thing here, and you see the diff is now false became true. How cool is that, right? That's super cool. But what we're going to do now is we're going to hook that up into our code so that we can do this using the button. And just to show you as well, if we do session logout, obviously we get logged back out again, and that's all working just fine. So what I'm going to do here is notice that we are exporting the action creators under the named exports login user and logout user. So now what we can do is we can take these, and inside of actions here, let's just import those. So the way that I like to do it before I continue is I like to have an alias inside of my package.json. This is just how I like to do things, especially if my components end up getting nested or in some kind of weird place. I like to have an alias just to refer to the store in an absolute manner. So I like to use the hash symbol, so hash store like that, and then we can do just /src/store. Remember that this is relative to the package.json. So then from package.json, we go src and then store, which is our store here. So now inside of this file here, I'm going to write import, and I'm going to do curly braces, login user, logout user. Notice I'm matching the names with these ones here, and I'm going to do from hash store. Remember this thing here, which is our store directory, and then /ducks/session. So now this should be working just fine, but I just need to restart my parcel because it starts freaking out for some reason. And now what I'm going to do here is for my buttons, I'm going to do onClick, and I'm going to put an inline function like this. I'm going to write dispatch, and then I'm going to write login user like so. So when I run my login user function with no arguments given to it here, which is what we have here, then it returns back an object here with type equal to login. So it allows us to dispatch that within our store. And I can copy that, and I can do a similar thing, but with logout user for my second button. So now I've got those two here. Let's have a look at our page. We click login, it logs us in. We click logout, and it logs us out. So that's pretty much it. I mean, this is like the most basic Redux you can do, and even the most basic Redux can become incredibly complicated, which is kind of, I guess, one of my biggest gripes against using Redux for everything, is that it just quickly becomes incredibly complex. But I do like to use Redux, and I love the amount of learning that you can get out of using Redux for the first time, especially after banging your head against the wall for a couple sessions. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video showing you how to get started with Redux. I know it has been a lot of code, but the truth is that we only just scratched the surface with Redux. Redux can be incredibly powerful, and with things like Redux Saga, with things like Thunk, with things like middleware, we haven't even touched on any of that, but that kind of stuff just makes Redux even more powerful. So if you guys want to see that, just let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like and subscribe. This has been Lucas with Better Coding Academy, and see you guys later.